Hello and welcome to Conversations with Ruth. I am Ruth. I am also known as Notorious RVG. During the time I worked with ACLU, I encountered legal aid attorneys and was always impressed with their dedication and good work. I realized that I do not know much about legal aid of North Carolina. I have wondered what legal aid really is. How is legal aid able to serve all those that are eligible for its services? That legal aid not only provides services in specific areas, but to target populations, such as veterans, seniors, Native Americans, and victims of trafficking. Equally important is what are the services legal aid provides? Well, to answer those questions, I ask that you join me in a series of interviews about getting to know legal aid of North Carolina. I promise you that I and you together, we will learn what legal aid is and what services it provides.
Action.
Welcome. Today we're going to talk about the Domestic Violence and Sexual Assault Initiative Project and the Battered Immigrant Project, both special projects of Legal Aid of North Carolina. The Domestic Violence Initiative Project is a statewide project that provides legal assistance to victims of domestic violence. The Battered Immigrant Project, and I may call it BIP for short, helps immigrant survivors of violence, and they provide legal assistance with immigration remedies. I know this is an oversimplification of the accomplishment and missions of this project. So to help us understand how it works and what the projects do, we have here Ms. Rona Karakova, who is the managing attorney of the Battered Immigrant Project, and Ms. Tiandra Miller, who is the director of the Domestic Violence Initiative Project. And I'm going to call to Domestic Violence Project. Is that okay? Because it's such a long name. Domestic Violence and Sexual Assault Initiative Project. So let's first start with the core mission of the project. In general terms, I have said in my introduction, to keep victims safe. How is that accomplished, Ms. Miller?
It's a very intricate situation, because to keep one safe, we empower victims to seek safety and to help them bring about a cessation of the violence. And so when you think about domestic violence or sexual assault, you look at it from terms of a community. You have your local domestic violence and sexual assault shelters and agencies, law enforcement, and then here at Legal Aid, we provide that very critical legal piece. And we provide legal representation for those seeking assistance under North Carolina's civil domestic violence and and sexual assault laws.
And the Battered Immigrant Project is part of this effort. Is that right, Ms. Karakova?
That is correct.
So can you tell me what are the criteria, or how did you describe a battered immigrant?
Well, we to sort of expand upon the general domestic violence work and that Legal Aid of North Carolina has done, the Battered Immigrant Project was created to serve the special needs of foreign national victims. So when we're talking about battered immigrants, we're really referring to foreign national victims of domestic violence, sexual assault, and human trafficking. And what we recognize is that they have needs that are different, and the immigration component plays a critical piece in keeping them safe. Because without legal status, they cannot obtain employment authorization, get a social security number, get a driver's license, or often seek independence and break the cycle of violence in their lives. So we realize that this immigration piece plays a critical role in escaping abuse, together with the more traditionally known types of legal remedies like domestic violence protective orders.
And I imagine that in that situation, the battered immigrant is very vulnerable to abuse.
That's correct. Our typical client is often too afraid to come forward and report what is happening to them to law enforcement, or even sometimes to a domestic violence agency, because they are scared and have often been threatened with their immigration status. So they're scared if they seek the assistance of law enforcement, that law enforcement, rather than protecting them, would move to remove them from this country. And abusers know this, and it is a way to manipulate and control their victims by keeping them undocumented sometimes, even if it's a husband-wife situation in which the U.S. citizen or lawful permanent resident spouse could apply for status. They choose not to if they want to manipulate and control their spouse.
Ms. Miller, how many attorneys are dedicated to this effort, and where are they located?
Okay.
And by this effort, I mean the domestic violence in general.
Presently, we have 40 attorneys that are fully funded throughout the state, and they sit in more than our 25 offices throughout the state. However, at any given time, we have up to about 150 legal aid attorneys working on these cases alongside those 40. So, yes, there are a lot of resources towards the needs of domestic violence and sexual assault victims. And as Rona was saying, because part of that, we're in court on a daily basis obtaining protective orders and other ancillary matters under our 50B. In North Carolina, it's known as 50B. It's under our North Carolina General Statute 50B.
I see.
That's the protective order.
I see.
And so...
and those 40 attorneys you mentioned, does that include the Battered Immigrant Project attorneys?
No, the battered immigrant attorneys are in addition to the 40. Okay. So as you can see, we're at this point, we have quite a lot of resources.
And those Battered Immigrant Project attorneys, where are they located? Ms. Caracola?
We have attorneys right now located in 4 offices, 4 field offices of legal aid. We are located in Charlotte, in Raleigh, in Fayetteville, and also in Greenville, North Carolina. However, I want to point out, although we are only in 4 offices in the state, we serve clients in all 100 counties of the state of North Carolina. And at the present time, we have clients in over 60 counties of North Carolina, because we do a lot of our representation of clients telephonically, where we are talking to them over the phone, exchanging correspondence with them by mail, and then representing them in appearances before Citizenship and Immigration Services, which don't require a personal appearance oftentimes.
Ms. Miller, when you mentioned the resources and that you are a statewide program, I realized that just last year, the Domestic Violence Project handled about 8,000 cases. That is an enormous amount. And the Battered Immigrant opened about 500. Correct. And how many attorneys are in the Battered Immigrant Project?
We have 6 attorneys, and 4 paralegals who work with us.
You represent individuals to get their domestic violence protective orders. That's one of the core remedies. And you mentioned immigration process. Can you tell us quickly what does that include?
The immigration, there are two primary types of immigration cases which we do. The first is called a U visa, also known as a crime victim visa. And this is a visa which is available to victims of certain qualifying crimes such as domestic violence, sexual assault, or human trafficking, who are helpful in the investigation and prosecution of the criminal activity committed against them. So they're people who generally report crimes and work with law enforcement as the criminal case proceeds. And so we do a lot of those types of cases. And those types of cases last a long time. The preliminary adjudication in those cases is usually not for 4.5 years. So, and we might not receive a final decision for 8 years. So those are cases that unfortunately are open in legal files for a long time because of the backlog of cases at Citizenship and Immigration Services.
And when you say open in legal files, what do you mean?
We mean that we open a case in our case management system and the
see.
case continues for a long time.
And that length of time of litigation is quite different from the typical domestic violence, which is short.
Absolutely, very short. Typically, that's within 10 days. So once someone is served, the hearing is set within 10 days. So that's another set of skills for those advocates, having to prepare for a hearing within a 10-day period of time.
So I wonder, with both of you, which are very specialized practices of law, do you also handle training of the attorneys and maintaining ongoing enrichment of their knowledge?
We do, luckily, because as I said, we're dispersed throughout the area. Usually the senior DV person in that particular office or in that region would provide training. We also have training offered through the task forces, CLEs, a good bit of our domestic violence attorneys also attend national level trainings. And so there's a lot of ongoing training. And I would like to add, in addition to the legal training, in either aspect, either it's here or Battered Immigrant Project, it is so imperative that people are trained on understanding the cycle of violence.
Correct.
And so that is a very critical component. I would almost say it's equal as the legal piece when you're working with victims of violence. Because if you don't understand that piece, there's a possibility that you may unknowingly re-victimize the victim.
Right. And I noted that the Domestic Violence Project refers to itself as a community-based program. Expand on that and tell me what that means.
It's community-based because wherever our offices are located, and our office sometimes will serve several counties and several judicial districts. But we really immerse ourselves in the greater domestic violence or sexual assault community. So most of the attorneys that work on these kind of cases, they belong to local task forces. Oftentimes we have served leadership roles on those task forces, and we work closely with other stakeholders. So when I say community-based, we come together as a community. And as I said in the beginning, we just provide the very critical specialized legal piece, but yeah.
And you also, both programs provide education to the community?
We do. We do a fair amount of outreach and education at the Battered Immigrant Project to important stakeholders like our community partners. We have really done a lot of outreach and education to domestic violence and sexual assault agencies throughout the state of North Carolina because they're the main source of referrals of clients to us. People who seek services at a shelter then will be referred to the Battered Immigrant Project for immigration assistance.
You mentioned the shelter, the domestic violence shelters.
Correct.
Are those also agencies that work together with the project? The shelters?
Yes, and actually the majority of our referrals come from those type of agencies, the domestic violence shelters or agencies.
I see.
Because just how in the community, since we're just the legal piece, oftentimes they're working on the front end with victims. And so, and that's a very good relationship, because if someone were to come directly to us, and they need other services, then it's vice versa. We would send them to those shelters or other community partners.
Ms. Miller and Ms. Karakova, either one of you, are there any grants, specific grants that support this incredible work you do?
Yes, there are grants, and because we're a nonprofit law firm, I mean, it's very important that we have grants to do this type of work. One of our largest funders is the Governor's Crime Commission, and so they're a pass-through, and they provide grants. We get what's called a VOCA grant. That's the Victims of Crime Act grant. That has been one of our largest grants. We've also been supported by the North Carolina Council for Women and Youth Involvement. And both of our projects receive that. We also receive funding from the state. And so as you can see, I think based on these funders and the longevity of the funding, that people really see these issues as a community issue, because it impacts not only the victim, but it impacts our entire community.
Well, Ms. Miller and Ms. Karakova, I think we don't have any more time. It's been very interesting and very important. I am pleased and privileged to have had you both here. Thank you so very much.
Thank you,
Thank
Your
you,
Honor,
Your
for
Honor.
having us.